My name is Aljamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of directors. And today we have a special event that's going to talk about faith, spiritual, and anti-racism community forum. Just a little bit more information. We're an organization, nonprofit that is committed to dealing with anti-racism, race equity, and the organization's been around for 10 years. In the last year or so, we changed our name and started to focus much more on some of the issues that we've been involved in the community. And we're one of the very few agencies that have anti-racist within its mission statement in this community. And as many people have commented and know about Omaha in particular and in Nebraska, because we live in a very segregated environments where our communities are divided and been that way historically. And so one of the things we're concerned about is how do we bring the communities together, deal with reconciliation, racial healing, and so on as to help our community be much better. Tonight, we are going to look at this event where we're going to have Reverend Dr. Cynthia Lindenmeyer, who's going to do a presentation, an overview of the topic. She has a number of PowerPoints she's going to share, and we'll also be open for questions and feedback and reactions twice during the presentation. So she's going to provide a presentation. We're going to take a break a bit where we have a bit more of a dialogue or exchange of information. We ask people to use the chat, and sometimes we may do what we call in football an audible, where we would have the participants to directly talk to Reverend Dr. Cynthia Lindenmeyer. Also, what we like to do is have people keep it brief. Again, this is an opportunity where we can learn from each other as well as explore this important topic that hasn't been explored too often in this community. We will use those chat concerns and questions. And again, we hope that people who are coming from different levels and different stages in their development of racial identity development, as well as anti-racism or race equity work, will be able to gain information from the participants as well as from our presentation. And then we will also put this video on our website as well as a copy of her slides so that people can come and look and review that if they would like to. This event will also be repeated next week. And again, it will be pretty much the same content material, but hopefully we'll have a different audience. And those of you who really enjoyed it and want to come back again, you're also welcome to repeat like you watch a good movie. And one of the brief introductions I've known about Reverend Cynthia Lindenmeyer is that I've known her for about at least 6 years. I met her initially when I was invited to speak at the church. Lauren Cruz invited me to speak about something related to race and culture with a panel of group members from our community. And the church was very much involved in doing a lot of racial engagement in our community. So that's how I got a chance to meet her. From that meeting, we developed a warm relationship, friendship about working with community groups and people about how you can bring people in a safe environment, and again, in a sacred environment, but more than anything, where people could banter and talk about some of those issues that we need to be about as we make our community better. And those events that we held were kinds of events that, again, was similar to table talks. And there were also opportunities where we had the commemoration of the Will Brown lynching that happened in 1919, where we had over 400 people there. So there were a number of events that we held at the church, and again, were instrumental in helping us develop as a community. And we were very excited that Moore and the church and Cynthia and so on were very much in helping us to go forward. The other thing I want to say is that one of the things in terms of her introduction, I don't have a long-winded introduction because there's a lot of information that we have to talk about. She's a founder of a group called Sacred Activism Community, which serves, and she also serves as chaplain at American Public University, which is headquartered near the Washington, D.C. area. She spent some time in the U.S. military, very much familiar with that, where she worked with a number of different group members, racial group members, and got to know a great deal about people from different parts of this country and some of the challenges they face dealing with race issues and so on, and just the challenges of being far away from some of their homes. And again, this has helped shape her perspective of some of the issues we're going to talk about tonight. She's been a pastor in several churches, and again, she also serves as in the U.S. as a U.S. military chaplain a while back. She's an avid reader. She reads about 2 or 3 books at a time. I'm aware of that. Has extensive book collection and very much engaged in social justice issues in our community. And also, I will say that she's worked with Leo Lewis at the Malcolm X Foundation. This is Black History Month, and we know this is one of those kind of events that people are looking forward to learn more about what's going on in our community, but also learn more about some of the experiences that African-American experience in our country. And again, part of the content of this event tonight is both Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X made comments about Sunday morning and Saturday mornings are sometimes the most segregated times in our country's period history and so on. And so we're going to get a chance to maybe explore why that is the case. And again, as I said earlier, our whole agenda is to give an honest exchange, a little bit of bantering about these issues. And again, hopefully will help people to go forward as we start to deal with some of the issues that have been plaguing this society for many years. And on that note, without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Reverend Cynthia Lindenmeyer, who's going to talk more about spiritual issues and related to anti-racism. So there you go. Reverend Dr. Cynthia.
Thanks, Ajman. And just give a little thumbs up if you can see the slides there.
Yes.
Tonight, talking about spiritual anti-racism. And I want to just preface and say this has really been the journey I've been on, and wanting to share from really coming out of a religious paradigm and seeing anti-racism from a more spiritual aspect. And Ajmal talked about the quote that we hear about why our church is so segregated at the 11 o'clock hour. And being a white minister, predominantly in white churches, what I often heard from the congregation, well-meaning folks, was like, how can we have more people of color in our pews? And usually what I respond with is, well, how many times have you gone to a Hispanic church or a Korean church or African American church? And they just kind of look at me. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the basis of where we start. Because when we as white people think that the baseline is that the people have to come to our church, we really got to turn that upside down and realize that's not really the greatest question. The question is, how come we're not going to other cultural churches and learning? And so one of the questions I want to ask tonight is, how did spiritual people succumb to fear and apathy? Because if you think about it, racism is really rooted in fear and discomfort. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So tonight we have two phases, and I'll be talking a good 12 to 15 minutes in phase one, and then we'll have time for open discussion. So just write down your notes and we'll really engage in that in our open discussion time. And then we'll go into a second phase where we get into more of the psychological aspects, and we'll start with a meditation, and there'll be time for open discussion after that as well, because your questions, your interaction, that's what's very important tonight, to really hear from one another and ask questions. So beginning with a definition, I didn't really come up with this from a book or anything, but focusing on the key word here, and it's going to be the root of our talk tonight, is beliefs. Because if you think of the Gandhi quote, our beliefs become our thoughts become our words become our actions become our habits, and our habits become our character, and character becomes our destiny. So really think about beliefs. And in a way, I think beliefs form thoughts, and thoughts form beliefs as well. So being aware of the core beliefs that result in whatever reaction you have to thinking about racism, and that will help lead to anti-racism. And when we talk about racism, I see racism really at three levels, and I'm using all eyes here. One is the institutional level, which would be systemic racism. That's where you have exchange of goods and services. That's where you have power, whether it be voting rights, and we're seeing that being dismantled. We're almost going back to pre-1965. You have power over education and curriculum. We're seeing the talk of critical race theory, where those in power want to go back to narratives that keep us being in that racist mindset. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the next level is the individual level of racism. That's where we have our implicit biases, our prejudices, our microaggressions, avoidance when we get uncomfortable. So there's your individual level. And then the third would be the very individualized interpersonal thought. And that's when we, at a very deep level, and I'm talking deep as in the unconscious, our core beliefs follow the people around us. And so all our actions follow a narrative that are within our set system or set narratives that we have our core beliefs structuring. And I love the word, I love Greek, and one of my favorite Greek words is schema. And a schema in scripture is the structure of what holds something together. And it also means a structure that holds your thought system, your beliefs, your storylines that you tell yourselves. And racism, it really can't be solved by a political structure because the political system keeps racism intact. And it really can't be solved by a legislative system because it's our policies that keep racism intact. And so for us as human beings, for us as a race consciousness, we have to think about what our core beliefs are, what are the blueprints holding up the structure of our beliefs. And my whole thesis for tonight, if you want to write anything down, is that we are spiritual beings. And so at our foundation, at our core, we have to begin with a spiritual schema, a spiritual structure. And spirituality is one of those words that gets tossed around quite a bit. When I say spirituality, I'm going to the deep part of the mind where we understand ourselves, our true selves is really being one with each other, one with God, understanding one spirit, one divine, one person, us all being unified as a people and not separated and existing in these separate structures. So spirituality and these narratives, how do we get away from spirituality? Nope, don't want to go to that slide. Hold on, way too far. The way we get away from spirituality, there we go, is we forget who we are. I love Rumi. Rumi was a Sufi mystic. And think about it this way. We are in this great ocean and we're just one drop in the sea of humanity. But we forget that we're all in this together. We forget that we're all in this ocean of life together. And one of the stories that I love that you've probably heard many times is a story that takes our understanding of reality and shows us that we're not seeing the biggest truth that we are surrounded by at all times. And it's two fish. You can have two little fish swimming along and an older fish is swimming towards them. The older fish is like, hey, what's up? How's the water today? And the two younger fish keep swimming. And the younger fish just turns to the other and says, what in the world is water? And sometimes that's how I see the importance of the reality of life that we live in. We're so distracted that we don't understand that we are just human beings on this planet with one another, that really we are spiritual beings having human experience, not the other way around. And so the reality that we're addressing tonight is that we are living in a reality where if you have white skin, you're having a completely different experience in America than a person with black skin. And how often do we stop and think about that reality? So beginning here with our core beliefs, our core thoughts, this is just what I have found as I've thought about racism and also thought about how my actions can be anti-racist. And a belief begins with a thought, or a thought begins with a belief. It kind of is like a circle. They play off each other. But when we begin with a system of duality, and what I mean by that is constructing life in a way that we see them and we see us, or we see good, evil, tall, small. The duality really comes from a fear-based belief that we could or are separated from God. And this is where religion and spirituality, I think, come a little bit differently. Separation, when we believe that we are separated from God, we're going to feel lonely, we're going to feel fearful, and it's going to shape our belief system. It's going to shape our narratives. It's going to shape whatever religious paradigm that we enter into. And for those that are operating within a Christian paradigm, we all know the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. And think about all the separateness there and the duality. You have man, woman, you have the tree of good, the tree of evil. God's separate, and we're cast out of the garden. But we don't talk too much about the tree of life. And I see the tree of life as an invitation to a tree of unity, a tree of understanding that God exists within our being. And so when I'm thinking about my own interaction with racism, I always ask myself, is my belief founded on an idea of duality, separation, or poverty? And poverty, this quote comes from the Gospel of Thomas, which is from the Gnostic Gospels. And what this quote in essence means is you got to know who you are. And when we know who we are, we're operating from our core belief, our core system, which is very deep in our mind. And so that's a lot to take in. But if you don't know who you are, if you don't have a strong core identity, it's going to create doubt. It's going to create fear. It's going to create all this negative energy that just does away with the positive energy of love, of oneness, of acceptance, of joy and peace. So spirituality, again, it's just coming up that the kingdom of heaven is within you, that God exists within you, that you are an individual understanding of the God spirit, that for those who are Christian, you see Christ as the incarnate God. And yet Christ is really the Christ consciousness in which that tree of life in Genesis was helping us to understand. When we achieve the Christ consciousness, it does away with duality, it does away with separation, it does away with poverty, and we don't have fear, and we really see past the constructs that our mind has been building for however long we've been alive. And we just see one another with a loving spirit, one as divine. And coming to that aspect of spirituality, and it's not just in Christianity. We hear the Buddha say that the divine is within you. We see it in the Upanishads, we see it in Hinduism, we see it in really all faith structures. And spirituality differs from religion in that religion has a set of core beliefs. And whatever faith you belong to, you know what those beliefs are. And you like those faith beliefs because that keeps you within your community, that's your tribe. And yet, in a way, religion can kind of keep us from being free to understanding who our true selves are. And I do believe, especially for white Christians, and James Cone talks about this in his book, and I'll talk about that book later on. But I think for white Christians that our religious beliefs keep us from really understanding that anti-racism involves being spiritual and not religious. And so thinking about your belief system, how much of your faith is built on duality, is built on that separation, and how much of spirituality can come and just release those bindings to help you be free and evolve past what could be holding you within a racist paradigm. This quote really goes to the core beliefs. And I know for me, as someone who's been practicing Christianity for 50 years, Christianity helped really assist in the way that I see the world. And when I'm hypnotized by understanding a religious narrative that maybe I see Jesus as white, when I stay within a religious narrative that I see God as way off in the distance, when I see or embrace religious narrative that I think I'm involved in original sin and that I have to do all this stuff to atone for my sins, then it creates fear, it creates doubt, it creates all this energy that keeps me really imprisoned from being free to being my true self. And then it's harder to extend that to other people, because really the God that we worship, the God that we see, is the God that we embody, who starts within our inner mind. And Ernest Holmes is a really current day mystic. He died in the 50s, I believe, and comes from a very unity based understanding of spirituality. So I'm hoping I'm on time, Ajamal, and I know we went through that. There's a lot of information to digest, and I don't know if questions popped up on the chat. And I'll shrink it here and we can.
So at this point, and what we have done is we've broken this up into two different parts. And so reactions, feedback, comments, chats, and maybe let's do audible, let you talk directly to Cynthia if you'd like to. So anyone who'd like to respond or make some comments, because one of the things we want to do is make this interactive as possible. Feedback.
I just want to say this is a good conversation. I want to ask a question. From what I hear, are you separating, in a sense, spirituality from Christianity, and maybe saying we need to tap more so into our spiritual beings, selves, more so than organized religion?
Oh, thank you. Awesome question. I see really our faith as an evolution. So thinking about life, our life, we have experiences that we grow and we learn from. And in your faith that you have now, whatever paradigm it's in, it probably isn't the same as when you were like 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's constantly evolving. So religion is within, it's an aspect of that whole ocean of spirituality. So spirituality is religion, but religion can't always be spirituality. But the two do play off one another. Yet a religious paradigm can sometimes hold us back from evolving into a spiritual realm. And I think, and this is all based on my own personal experience with spirituality and religion. And you're talking to someone who's been in religion like 50 years, really, ever since I was in Sunday school. And for me, spirituality and seeing God within and seeing God as a divine incarnation in all human beings has really helped me see others. And I'll just talk about it from a namaste. And namaste means to me that each person has a center in their being of love, light, joy, and peace. And when you're in that spot of love, light, joy, and peace, and I'm in that place of love, light, joy, and peace, then we are truly one. And that's, to me, what namaste means. And that's a very spiritual place to arrive to. And it does away with that separation and that duality. And for me, I think it's hard for white Christians who are within a religious paradigm to break free and totally become anti-racist while operating within a religious paradigm. And James Cone, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, that's a lot of what he talks about in his book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And Barbara Holmes, who's an African-American theologian, she talks about in a book about the cosmos of spirituality. And she just came out with a new book. I haven't read it yet, but I look forward to it. So it's coming at it from a metaphysical perspective of God, whatever you want to call God, the divine energy, being, whatever life force, however you relate to a creator or divine being. I hope, does that help answer that question?
Yeah, that was a great answer, and I can relate to it fully. So I appreciate you saying this and sharing that you're in that space, because I agree with you about how we how I'm kind of skeptical about religion being able to allow a person to be anti-racist myself. Just the history of things that's happened from our religious segments, from Catholics, turning people into slaves and stuff like that. It's just hard to attach to something like that when you know the history of it. And for those who have accepted it, I mean, you have to accept the fullness of what it came with and its origins, and it's tied in to something that's not what I would consider spiritual or having a relationship with a good God, So I totally respect what you're saying, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, this is my own journey, and it's not just it isn't just people of different, looking at people who may be different for you based on skin color. It's also maybe people who have a different political belief system. I mean, it being, when one sees everyone is one and you love other people, then that separation and the hate and the dualism, it goes away. So I'm using this within an anti-racism frame, but it really works for any discord or hatred, because when you see others as an extension of the divine spirit within you, you can't hate other people.
We have other questions. I see somebody unmuted. Somebody wanted to ask a question or comment at this point. Someone else?
Yeah, I would like to have you explain a little bit about atonement. I think a lot of people, or a lot of white Christians anyway, look at atonement as a way of paying for our wrongs. And there's another way to look at it, at one-ment, where we are all together. And I guess a lot of the atonement is believing in an afterlife. And I guess I think if you're truly at one, then you're only concerned with what is here now. And afterlife is distraction. And I'd just like your thoughts on atonement.
Yeah, I think we're dealing with a death in the family right now, and I can tell how much I've changed in understanding. There's some religions where they see death as a marriage of going into a new relationship, and I think I'll just say my American experience within the church, death is something that one fears and doesn't really talk about. But atonement, from a Christian theological perspective, goes back to a concept that came up, really, like St. Augustine was probably the one that really gave it energy, but an idea of original sin, and that we have to atone for that original sin, which of course is so steeped in separation from God. And I mean, what kind of God is going to create you and then punish you? It makes no sense. But that's the type of theology that really grew wings, starting from the 3rd, 4th century. And it's, if you look at the history of racism, and before we had racism towards people who had different skin color, you had racism of people who had different nationalities or different faith paradigms. And there's many ways you could argue that the church needed to come up with annulments, but injunctions for money. But really, it's rooted in power and hierarchical systems, and any theology that's based on hierarchy strays very far from spirituality, because in spirituality there's no hierarchy. And I think if we go back and we look at an understanding of who Christ was, Christ understood God, and we can all understand God and live that out as well. And to me, the Christ consciousness is really what the Tree of Life was all about. And we had the opportunity, and I see Genesis, of course, from a very metaphysical perspective, that the Tree of Life is available for all of us. But atonement, I think, was just a really bad belief system. If you go back to that schema, it's a belief system that provides a structure in which racism can thrive, which sexism can thrive, which genderism can thrive. I mean, you name it.
There's a question that comes from the Facebook. It says, do you see any problems with oneness erasing the importance of identity or differences?
So I think that goes back to understanding race consciousness. And when I say race consciousness, I mean human race consciousness. So we have a collective consciousness, and understanding that spirit, or God, however you want to say it, spirit individuates into your unique life experience, into my life experience. And so you are having your unique life experience as I do. And I do believe we each come here having a purpose, something that drives us, something that gives us passion. And like I'm passionate about turtles, right? But someone else could be passionate about playing the piano. I'm not passionate about playing the piano, but I love that you're passionate about playing the piano. And our uniqueness, our individuality is the creativeness of spirit. And when I'm driving or I'm walking, I see spirit everywhere creating, being its creative self. And I think us being individual creations is what makes this life so exciting. And we are one when I think of the word wholeness. In order to be whole, you have to have different parts, but different parts can help create the wholeness. And it goes back to that drop in the ocean. When we all come together as drops, we create this wonderful sea of existence. And yet, if we want to be in our own little lifeboat, then we're separate and we fail to really engage and interact with one another. I hope that answers that question.
Cynthia, I have a question for you. And again, it goes back to the essence of this event tonight. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King talked about the separation of races in a religious time in our society and so on. And the question that I raised comes back to many times when we say we want to interact with Christians or Muslims or Jewish or any faith, we tend to be in our own enclaves or whatever. And many of these faiths believe, I suspect, in the same God. Why are we so segregated or separated, or why do we racialize where we go to church, and particularly if we all believe in the same God? And I'm thinking about Malcolm's conversations about when he went to Mecca and he saw all these different religious groups, I mean, the Muslims coming together, different races and so on. And my question basically is, why is it that white folks go to white churches, black folks go to black churches, Latinos go to Latino churches, and so on and so on? Why is that? And particularly people who actually do believe in, I think they believe in the same God. So why are we so segregated even in the year 2020?
I think it goes back to whatever our core belief systems that leads to thoughts that lead to action. So we'll take Malcolm X, for example. So Malcolm X comes to know Islam through the teachings of what? Louis Farrakhan, right?
Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah Muhammad, thank you. And so Elijah Muhammad gives Malcolm X a system, a core belief system in which he's building his framework, right? And part of that is white people are evil. And so Malcolm X, he goes to Mecca, and there he sees people of all skin colors, people from all over the world, people from all cultures, worshiping Allah, embracing the tenets of Islam. And it changes his whole core belief system. And when his whole core belief system is changed from a religious paradigm, look how much it affected the way he viewed the world. And if you listen to Malcolm before Mecca and you listen to him after, it's completely different. And it changed him. And so for those who are religious, and it doesn't matter where you're located or what religious paradigm you are, when you change that foundation, that schema of your core beliefs, it will anticipate and go out into every other aspect of your life as well. And so this is really the whole premise of what I'm saying. If you change your thinking, it's going to change your life. And I know for me, when I was able to change and let go of all my religious beliefs, which is a lot. I mean, when you have a doctorate in theology, it takes a lot of work to undo 10 years of theological training and realize, you know what? I believed, it goes back to that quote by Ernest Holmes. I was hypnotized by all this teaching and training from a religious paradigm that was a lie into that human race consciousness of Christian theology. And that's why, for me, embracing a spiritual helps as well. And I think that's what really happened to Malcolm. When he went to Mecca, it was a spiritual quest for him. And that's what is wonderful about Islam, is it's one of their pillars is to take the journey to Mecca, because it's part of a spiritual freeing for them.
Are there other questions, feedback from the participants today? This is really your show.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to, I'm a slow processor and there's a lot going on in my head right now. So I don't know exactly which question to go to here, but what Yashal was saying in her first question really resonated with me. I also don't really identify with religion. I feel like my experience, it's been very divisive. And so spirituality is kind of the direction that I personally go. But when you were responding to her question, you said something about spirituality is a form of religion. Is that correct? Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I've always seen them as sometimes intersecting, but also in two different areas. And so I'm just curious if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so the tribe that I'm with now, the community, who are a spiritual community, most of them got to where they are because of bad experiences within a religious community. However, if that religious experience helped them to really evolve, and when I say evolve, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's a transformational process. A person can transform maybe through a death of a loved one, or a loss of a relationship, or a health concern, or losing a job, or many different ways that we use the term awoke a lot when we talk about racism, but I also think it's very important to really use that term in a spiritual way too. And if we look at, I'll just speak to Christianity because it's what I know best, but in Christian history, we have mystics, St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, who really were religious and then became spiritual. And but I think there's a lot of great spiritual teachers out there that were never confined first to any kind of religious paradigm. It's like they were just born into that. And but sometimes people have to choose. And I'm a big Star Wars person. And if you've watched any of The Mandalorian or Boba Fett, there's a great lesson between a choice, and one has to choose between what you're comfortable with and what you're attached to, what you're comfortable with, or what the unknown is. And I think religion it's the known, right? It's a set creed of beliefs, it's a set community. But spirituality is the unknown, and it's like taking that leap of faith. It's taking the red pill. It's getting out of that matrix that really holds you back. And again, I'm talking from a religious perspective because that's where I was immersed for over 50 years. But there's folks who are so spiritual who never had to wade through the I hate to say quicksand, but through all the belief systems of religion. But I do believe folks that can be spiritual and religious at the same time.
Other feedback, other questions? Are we ready to switch up, Cynthia, to a presentation more?
Sure, we can go to the second part.
And by the way, the PowerPoints will be on our website as well as the recording of this event.
So the second part, we're going to have, it's about a 5-minute meditation. And boy, meditation can generate different reactions in people, like, oh no. But it's going to be kind of a guided meditation. And I invite you, wherever you are, you can just relax in your chair. If there's a place to lay down next to where you are, just whatever you can do to make yourself comfortable. But we'll be starting with meditation. You'll understand the progression of where I'm going. And then we'll talk a little bit more into the psychological aspects of understanding racism that will lead to actions of how to be involved in anti-racism. So again, guided meditation. I just invite you to be comfortable. Just be aware of the floor supporting you. Be aware of the air that you breathe, the body that transports the mind, the color of your skin. Take a breath in, aware that the air that flows into every body, regardless of your race or your gender, your economic status, filling your lungs, hold that breath for just a moment. And then just exhale through the lungs, through the mouth, through the nose, releasing the life energy just back into the universe, knowing that you are safe. And as you uncover belief structures that surround this very painful and difficult topic, you are safe. So I'll ask you to just silently repeat 2 phrases with heartfelt intention. So I'll say the sentence, and you can just repeat. I take full responsibility for my thoughts, words, and actions. It is not enough to not be racist. I must look for ways to be actively anti-racist. I'm now going to make a series of statements, and after each, notice your reaction. Is your reaction in your body? Is it in the heart? No, not all of these statements may be true for you, so just allow yourself to be vulnerable and process the effect of the statement, no matter the discomfort or defensiveness. Let's begin. People who look like me are overrepresented in workplaces, in positions of power, in politics, in the media, in educational institutions, legal institutions, and more. I can eat at a restaurant, shop, drive my car, and travel without fear of being followed or arrested, harassed, or killed. When my children or children who look like me get together and play or even get a little loud, and act out, they are not seen as a threat or as criminals. We're moving to the last part of the meditation. Just silently repeat the following. I realize I have certain privileges because of the way I look. I did not earn these privileges, yet I subconsciously benefit from them. I realize I have certain privileges because I am considered a model minority. I acknowledge my blind spots that contribute to racism, especially institutional racism. I am thankful for the opportunity to reconstruct my belief system. At this time, just check back in with your body. Connect back to the feeling of support from the ground beneath you. With your next inhale, bring in compassion for yourself. Let it seep in. With your next exhale, breathe out any shame or guilt. For guilt really only hinders our progress. Showing up here is always a first step. See yourself with a clear perspective. Of course, correct your thoughts, your words, and actions. When you're ready, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. I'm just thinking about your reaction to the meditation. Did you react maybe physically tensing up somewhere? Or were your thoughts just going off on and on and on? Or did you just feel tremendous sorrow in your heart? And so our three centers of intelligence, the way we respond or react to something, it's important to really understand what's going on, reflect on that, and then look for balance. When they're all in balance, then that's where we find our love center, our heart center. Now, our mind, for most of us, is just going all the time. And thinking back to our belief system, it all starts right here. And I'm just going to say that there's three levels to our mind: the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and unconscious mind. And really, where we want to get to, that spiritual part of us, is there deep in the unconscious mind. But so much of our life, we're living not only in the subconscious mind, but the conscious mind. The conscious and the subconscious are always going back and forth. And racism really is rooted right there in the subconscious mind, where our belief systems start, where our thought system creates the narratives, creates the fears, our reactions. And so meditation, the reason why we started with meditation is meditation allows us to really access that deep inner part. And I'm always asked, what's the difference between prayer and meditation? And I just know, for me, I notice that when I'm praying, I'm kind of like telling God or spirit like what to do, or praying to something. But when I'm meditating, I'm listening. And I definitely believe that when we listen, that's where we can access the core of who we are. And meditation's a great spiritual practice. Journaling's a great spiritual practice. Even paying attention to the dreams that you're having, because your unconscious mind is very much alive in our dreams. But when we are aware of our thoughts, we can change our thoughts and we can change our life. But when we change our thoughts, we can also change our belief system that will help us to change our words, which will help change our actions, to help us be an active anti-racist. And this will help kind of illustrate things a little bit better. So I'm real excited. I teach yoga and I love it. And one of the things I always talk about with the yoga class, we do a little series where we work on balance. And When people say, I'm not good at balance, guess what happens? They're not good at balance. So that old idea, I'm not good at balance, is you're going to fall when we're doing a pose that we're trying to balance. And that just validates your belief, I'm not good at balance. Or let's say you say to yourself, I'm not good at remembering names. Well, if you say you're not good at remembering names, guess what? You're not going to be good at remembering names. And so we want to be aware of these beliefs that are driving our thoughts, which are driving our actions. And so creating a new idea, and that's why I encourage the yoga class, say, I'm good at balance while we're doing a balance pose. Or say to yourself, hey, I'm really good at remembering names. And you'll see how that changes. And right here, the reason why I have a little acorn nut thing here is, if you plant a seed, let's just go with a carrot. If you're going to plant a carrot seed, it's probably not going to come out a tomato, right? Whatever you plant, you're going to get. And the law, the part that just happens, is the soil is going to produce. We don't know how that works, but whatever idea that we think, a lot of times it's going to manifest. And so being aware of what we're thinking and what our core beliefs are driving our actions is a huge part, I believe, of evolving to a place where you can be an anti-racist. However, what keeps us stuck is being uncomfortable, because we don't like to be uncomfortable. And our we all know, we've all heard from our psychology classes, the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And so that's why going back and changing those core belief systems can really help us. And also, the more you get uncomfortable, you're not going to have these fight, flight, or freeze. You're just going to get used to it. I remember there was a TED Talk many years ago about a guy who did 100 things to deal with feeling rejected. And so, maybe start off with 10 things that you can do to feel uncomfortable, and then you won't fear that level of uncomfortability. But to be an anti-racist, you got to be uncomfortable. But there's got to be some education that goes into it. And Ajmal, he always likes me to talk about different books and everything. So I'll do that right here in our little part, because there's so many ways to educate yourself. And I'll start with How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, who also wrote Stamped from the Beginning, but that's a pretty dense book. How to Be an Anti-Racist, it has good definitions in here and some ways to think about actions that you're currently engaged in and what you could be to be more of an anti-racist. Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, African-American woman, journalist. There's so many nuggets in this book, and I think with the recent incident with Whoopi Goldberg, one of the things that I didn't know until I read this book was that Hitler gained the whole belief system of how to eradicate Jewish people from America, and how we pretty much eradicated Native Americans and what we were doing to African Americans with slavery. So caste, wonderful way to educate yourself. Lies my teacher told me, white history teacher who in college spent a semester down in Mississippi, and it totally changed the way he saw things. And he was actually a white professor that was teaching at a historically Black college. And he just died of, I think just a couple of months ago. That's a great book. New Jim Crow, again, African-American author, a lawyer, and powerful book, especially for us who live in Nebraska. We're seeing all this money being talked about the prison system and how we keep changing laws to just keep incarcerating. Sadly, it's more people of color than white people. Slavery by Another Name is kind of the same premise. Douglas Blackman, white journalist, and how the prison system and the police system is really just, as he says, slavery by another name. Because of course we as white kids are taught that slavery is a thing of the past. Well, read this book and you'll realize slavery is just as much alive today as it was 50, 60 years ago when our history book said it ended. And then white fragility, professor, white woman, and talks about being aware of your reactions and when you feel guilt, how really as a white person got to work through that. Otherwise, you're never going to get to be an anti-racist. And one of the quotes in here that I find as a white minister very profound, but I found is true, is she says that white progressive churches are actually the ones that perpetuate systems of racism. And that's why I'm a little skeptical when white churches say they want to get involved now in racism, because they're operating within those paradigms. And that's why I want to call this talk a spiritual method. And then I have spiritual books here because I think that's important. Another gentleman who just passed away, this letting love is letting go of fear. I do believe that fear is the root of racism. And it's hard to fear other people or have any kind of prejudicial thoughts or ill will towards anyone when you love them. And so, wonderful book, and just practicing engaging the love muscle, loving others. I also have on there the Barbara Holmes book, Race in the Cosmos, African American Theologian. And that's really, I'd say the two books that I predicated this whole presentation on are all here. The Cross and the Lynching Tree and Race in the Cosmos, which I couldn't find that book. And then this thing called You is within the spiritual paradigm of the structure of which this whole talk was based. And then if you just don't like reading books, I just put some things that you could watch that really kind of help broaden your perspective. And we talked about that reality that we live in, is if you listen to some of these podcasts or watch some of these things as a white American, it'll help you understand just how your reality is so different. And it's not because of the way a person is. It's really because of going those three levels of racism: the institutional racism, the individualized racism, and then at a very deep level, our subconscious and our conscious level of racism. And so, like Ajamal said, you'll get access to these slides, so you don't have to furiously write things down. And so, how to be an anti-racist and actions. Ajma and I are always talking to people about action. I mean, you can read all these books if you want, you can say you're an anti-racist, but until you're actually doing something. And I think where you can begin is just begin reflecting on your responses to things and why you have that response, and understanding what your core beliefs are. And then by meditation, you'll help access those core beliefs to begin changing your thoughts, which will also change your actions. And then just get uncomfortable. It's okay. And I think a lot of times as white people, we're afraid we're going to say the wrong thing, but you got to get out there and then look at your inner core of friends. I know we've been in this pandemic for 2 years, and I realized my inner core, I've got more African Americans in my inner core than I do white people, and it's been great, except for I will say that my African American friends, they love to bring me food and cook, so that's always fun when I have to not eat as much cobbler and things. So I think that is our last slide for our open discussion, and just realizing fear can hold you prisoner, and asking yourself what can set you free. I will stop the share, and so we can go back to open screen here. How are we doing on time, Ajamal?
We're excellent. We're good.
Oh, good.
The audience, I would like for have a lot of participation, but let me throw something out to kind of hopefully start the process a little bit. And I'm a little self-confession here. For many years when I was teaching college and so on, I made the statement, I would always talk about family reunions, and I went to a few over my lifetime. And at some point I said something where I kind of put my foot in my mouth, and I said, I've never heard a white person talk about a family reunion. Do white people do family reunions? So I throw it out and everybody started laughing at me in the class and so on. And I got an earful, and it was an interesting cultural exchange. So here's the turn of this question I have here. How many people who are participants have been to a faith or a religious institution or organization other than their own? So I've had a chance to, when we settle refugees, go to mosque. I've been to Jewish synagogue, or it's redundant when I say that, but synagogue, when I did Leadership Omaha and some of the folks I knew. I've been to a Buddhist temple before and so on, and each time it's a different experience. So my question to the audience or participants, how many of you have had an experience going to another holy place of other religious groups or faithful people, and what was it like for you? Anyone?
I could share a little bit about that. I have gone to many different Christian and other religious things at different times, and my experience has been that they're very similar, but very different at the same time. There's a sense of the holy that's present. There's a sense of community that is why I attend a community of faith. There, are differences in the words and the practices. Some are more inclusive, some are not. Some you can't take communion, some you can. But I think it's a great experience to do that, just like it's a great experience to go to other events that are from other cultures, that, sharing meals, going to restaurants that are different than what you normally eat. Any of those things are valuable.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Other people?
I can share quickly. I've only gone to different Christianity religions, and this was all in my youth. And as I said earlier, religion kind of turned me off, and that was why. I never really resonated with, I grew up Catholic, and I never really resonated with the Catholic religion. And then the other places I went with friends within Christianity also weren't the most inclusive, I didn't feel. And so, to be frank, I just haven't really explored other religions past that. I've talked with people about their religions, but I've never gone to another place of worship because those places typically make me a little bit uncomfortable. So it's something I need to sit in and think about a little bit more. I appreciate what you shared about the different slides that you had about the subconscious, conscious, and how meditation kind of affects that. So I'm going to be thinking about that a little bit more, but I do agree with Carol that I've been to other cultural events and shared meals, and I find great value in that. So I don't see why religion would be any different, but just something that I need to address within myself and think further through.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other reactions, other feedback. And maybe even also reacting to Cynthia's presentation. I mean, I just threw that out to start it up. I'm a provocateur. That's part of my role as a facilitator. So other feedback, other reactions, anything that Cynthia said in her presentation that resonated with you that you want to comment or respond to?
I'll make a couple comments. I kind of chair the racial justice team at First United Methodist Church, and in the past we used to have a lot of activities where we had people come, but since COVID we've pretty much done Zooming events, and we've done a lot of book studies, and we've read a lot of the books that were on those lists. And what I have found to be really helpful is not just to read those books, but to have conversations about them with other people. And when we do that, we've been able to identify the things we might have been guilty with about, that we've read about, and share. And actually, I think that's helped us come to terms with the fact that we all do acts in ways that are racist at times, even though our core belief is that we are all one, and that's what we're striving for. But it also helps us to hold each other accountable for what are we going to do next in terms of some kind of an action. And one of the things we're doing at our church is we're going to be having a forum very soon with Justin Wayne, who's our Black senator from Omaha, who is sort of orchestrated the plan for using some of the ARPA funds that are available through the state to help North Omaha. And so we've invited him to be part of a Zoom conversation. And we're going to try to get a couple of other senators to join him, perhaps McKinney from North Omaha, and even John McAllister, who's a Republican, but who is a good thinker. And so we're hoping to have a good discussion and to inform our congregation of what's going on and come up with steps about what they can do next to help the legislature see where that money might be good for North Omaha.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. The other thing, I'm going to throw a little shameless plug, and this is part of my journey also, but I had an opportunity at First United Methodist Church to participate in a deep dive with some of the members and some people from the community about talking about race issues. And it was like a 6 or 7 week period that we did this. And it was, I think I was more of the facilitator or anything, but what was powerful for me was that when people talked about their own issues and had a safe space to do it, I had not heard a lot of that outside of a classroom. And we've done table talk things, but it was profound to have people do it week after week. Table talk, we've normally done it just like one time and it was do it again next year, whatever. In this particular environment, we did it over a series of weeks. And one of the comments I make, and I make even today, many people of color have never heard white folks talk about, or even people of color talk about, deep issues related to race. And we don't have too many safe places in our society where we give people that space where they're not going to get you, I got you or something. So it was very profound for me to experience that. And I even shared that I liked it so much, I agreed to do it again. And I think that if we do more of that, it can help address some of the issues that Cynthia talked about today, and Carol obviously talked about. But the thing that I always question is, if we are people of a group or community or village, how come we're not doing more of that organically among ourselves? Do we need institutions to help us do that, or can we just do that? And I think one of the things part of this conversation is, how do we start that journey even within our own self based upon what was shared today? But really appreciate that. And again, it was a mission moment, and it influenced me greatly to see the world completely different when I can have a tender time to talk about some of these challenges issues we face in this day and age. But the most important thing I push here tonight is we cannot be silent in light of what is going on in our society. So other feedback, other reactions. We got about 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes, and we're gonna get into the valuations and other things like that. So other feedback, and as they say, this time will pass and we will not get to repeat this night again. We will have a different night 2 weeks or a week from now, but this is your time to speak. And those who are quiet, who I see you on this, who I know you're quiet, do you have a question or comment or anything? And I was about shut up.
Let me say one thing while they prepare themselves to talk. And that's about your presentation. Something I appreciate is that I noticed in the meditation, it seems like you were speaking to other Caucasians with some of the things that you were saying. And it made me think about Malcolm X. Like anyone saw that movie, at one point he said, I guess in the movie, some young white girl came up to him and was like, you know, sincere with, hey, Malcolm, what can I do? And, you know, he was a little rude to her. And like you said, that was the Malcolm prior to going to Mecca. But even I imagine the Malcolm coming back from Mecca, the thing that I would love to see Caucasians do is have this conversation amongst themselves, you know, because like when Black people put it out there that there's a problem, you know, it sounds real accusatory or sounds like we're angered. And I mean, dealing with the historical reality of what we experience is like this conversation needs to be had. However, maybe it should come from more Caucasians talking to each other, you know, sharing, enlightening like you've enlightened all of us, Cynthia. And others, if you know, you guys really had that conversation with each other, because eventually we do want to get to the point where we can do what Brother Aljamal is talking about, having more of these forums where we can sit in safe spaces and have this conversation. Me personally, as a Black woman, because I am in tune with my spiritual reality, like you said, I don't hate white people, you know, and it's like when we have this conversation, it sounds like I'm coming from a place of hate, but I'm not, because I am a spiritual being and I am tapped in, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And so if you guys can warm each other up to this conversation, I think that'd be great, where we can have it on a larger scale and have it more frequent. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Look like somebody, Mark Jones, somebody want to speak? I see somebody else want to speak. You're on mute, Paul, I can't hear you. You're off mute and then we good.
And
You
what
on
about
now?
Mark? Is she on mute? Mark Jones too?
Is that you, Paula? Okay, I bet we can't hear you though. Let me unmute. Can you hear me now? Still can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? It says unmute, ask to unmute.
Maybe we can have her, maybe you can put your question in the chat and then, or your comment in the chat. Thank you.
She's got her hand up, okay.
We could hear her that last time she spoke.
Oh, speak then, okay, go ahead, speak. You can't hear now? Is that coming through? Paula, you may have to write it in the chat there because we can't hear you. That's part of our technology sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Other feedback, other reactions. And by the way, this is being supported through Humanities Nebraska. And so one of the things that Moore is trying to do is get more support for doing interracial dialogue, not only in Omaha, but throughout the state. So our goal is to do a lot more of these. And when in the evaluation, we'll ask the participants if there's some other things you think we should be about to bring our communities and our world together. Our role is to help facilitate more of that. So think about that as you fill out that evaluation, and we will have an evaluation that we will send out to you during this session and give you time to complete it. Paul, are you able to unmute or make it happen? Wow. And what I could do, we could hold that telephone. I've done that when mine didn't work sometimes. I actually made a phone call and then we could hear that way. Other reactions, other feedback? Cynthia, I was going to ask you a question in particular in terms of your relationships with the other communities you've been to. What is it like for you in Omaha or elsewhere in terms of how we deal with religion and racism? And I know you've lived in other cities and states and so on, but how do you compare us? I'm always, as a Nebraska, like to always ask outsiders, how do we fit into the scheme of things from what you've seen in terms of our divisions or whatever? Cynthia?
Yeah, I've lived here in Omaha 9 years now. This is the 19th state I've lived in. I lived in Korea for 2 years, a military background. And I did not understand Omaha and the segregation and the really overt racism until I started learning the history. And I lived down in La Vista, and it wasn't until I started really meeting and befriending folks that lived in North Omaha that I began to see, whoa, there's a huge difference here. And it took really, I'm very thankful for the patience of some really good friends to have love for me, to explain things. And when Shaw was talking, she said something about she not being angry. And I remember Leo Lewis, who I have tremendous respect for, Nick, who's on here, he's working on a film, And there's a part of his film where he shows Leo being very angry. And I'm thinking, you know what? I bet you a white person who doesn't know Leo would just like respond like, oh dear, there's an angry black man. But because I know Leo, I just know Leo's passionate. And Leo is like anyone who cares about something. So in Dr. Amani, I remember spending some time with him and him talking to me about how there's a North Omaha way to the airport and there's a white Omaha way to the airport. I learned about Burke, who was the superintendent of OPS, and how he wouldn't allow white teachers to teach, or I shouldn't say African American teachers to teach white kids. I learned about District 66 and how can we have, what, 10 school districts when really we only need one school district, and the disparities that that's created. And so it was kind of thrown into this fire of learning and seeing things. And it came to the point where I was spending more time in North Omaha than I was really anywhere else. I remember when the pandemic started, I got a job teaching over at Lifetime Fitness, and I hadn't really been over in that area of Omaha. And Lifetime Fitness is like 166th and Pacific, or I don't know, but I was like, and I was leaving the Malcolm X Center to go teach class. And I was just like, did I just do cosmic travel here? I mean, why is it so different? And to me, Omaha is a completely racist town. Nebraska is a completely racist state. And it's because we have leadership that, one, is white at power and just doesn't get it. The reality that they're swimming in is abhorrent. And, you know, I get really ticked off when I hear that the governor isn't going to give funds to help those who need it. And we were talking about the America Cares, the relief plan for that. I did sit in on the webinar today, and I look at the people who make the decisions of where the grants go. And I know these people, they're good people, but the diverse representation of who allocates the money, it's not right. It's unequal. I think about the Secretary of State for Nebraska, the parole system, how I think they only look at who's going to go on parole maybe once or twice a year. And so our prison system, everything's backlogged. I look at our judges. I look at our council members. I mean, it's ridiculous. And until you and I speak out and do something about it, nothing is going to change. And Justin Wayne, Terrell McKinney, phenomenal people. And I think it's LB 1024 that Terrell McKinney has introduced. But it takes getting help when he's down in Lincoln to support and back his plan. And one has to be engaged and aware of what's going on. And I know for me, I'm part of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance, and that's where I learn a lot of what's going on. But I look at the websites, and then I talk to my friends who are impacted by systemic racism every day. And so it's understanding that their reality needs to be my reality too. I can't just sit back in my white privilege and think someone else is going to change it. I got to be engaged in being active as well. I just wrote a letter. They're wanting to sell liquor next to a friend's church in North Omaha, and we go and speak to the legislation because selling liquor at a convenient mart right next to a church that's not going to happen in Elkhorn, but it's happened in North Omaha. I mean, I could go on story after story, but it takes being aware. And yeah, these books are great, but understanding what's going on in the local area is important. And if you don't know where to begin, I'd say just go to Justin Wayne, Terrell McKinney's websites, understand what they're doing, and go. When they introduce a bill, go down there, advocate, be a voice to help them out. that's what they need. I'm sorry, I went on a little diatribe there, as I do.
Paul, can you hear now? Can you talk? Still, we can't hear you. Your voice is not there. Wow. We
Well,
are.
While we're waiting for Paula, I just wanted to say that Karen Deanspear made a comment that she's a member of the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, and that they're working on a process to work on racism through a curriculum called Beloved Conversations. And she said there are several parts to it, and the discussion that we're having tonight fits right into it. And she just wanted to appreciate this.
Yeah, and
Evaluation. Oh, go ahead.
I do think for white Christians, it's important to balance the spiritual aspect as well. And I'm in a book group right now. We just started Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, and I was like, wow, I could have added a lot of what she talks about in that book, because it talks about emotions and feelings and core beliefs in that book as well. But I think in whatever church or whatever your community is, you got to get uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable, you're going to transform, you're going to grow, and you're going to evolve. And, nothing changes if you don't change. It's just going to stay the same. And ask yourself, in 1 year, how do I want to be active? In 1 year from today, how can I say that I've been an anti-racist?
Good. Folks, we have the evaluation form, a link on the chat area. So we'd like you to fill that out, and particularly it's electronically. So you can fill that out right here, and then we get it compiled through Google Docs and so on. It helps us evaluate the event. And there are a number of questions on there that even ask us about other events you'd like to see us sponsor or work with other groups to make something happen. So we'd like to have you fill that out, as many of you who can. And we will be around for the next 10 minutes or more. But if there's any other comments or feedback, and Paul, you could have put it in the chat, what you had to say or comment or whatever. But again, I know technology.
I did put it in the chat. She's under Mark Jones too.
Right. Who's that?
That's Paula.
Right. And she, for some reason, her is muted where she can't talk.
But I see her in the chat.
Oh, you do? I don't see it. Do you see it?
Yeah, in the chat it says, my screen says that I am muted by the host. I was grateful to hear the comment that God is the divine incarnation of all of us. I feel that way, but never had the words.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Appreciate that. Relaying that. Thank you. It's weird. Muted by the host. Still can't hear. Unmute. Yeah, even unmuted. Cannot hear. Any other feedback before we close out tonight? Fill out any other likes, comments, reactions, feedback.
I just had one last question that may be kind of loaded, but you were talking about being like sitting in that uncomfortability. How have you had any experience with getting folks to the conversation that don't feel there's a problem? Does that make sense? Like, typically in these spaces, people show up who want to learn or want to grow or whatever the case, but there's also those folks that are just like, I don't see a problem. I don't need to converse in this. How do you invite those folks in without being forceful or calling them out or, any of that sort of?
I assume that's for Reverend Dr. Cynthia Lindenmeyer. Is that for you there? That question, you want to answer that?
So
It could be for everybody.
Who was that aimed at? You didn't call them names, and I appreciate that.
I don't mean to sound like some 60 hippie, but it all goes back to love. You got to love other people and love where they are. And I got frustrated because I was involved in the church, and it's like, let's say you're trying to teach a kindergarten physics. They're just not going to get it. And you got to be patient. But most of all, you got to love people, and you want to do this out of love and help them. And I trust in the Spirit, and I'm like, you know what? This person, they will come around. And I mean, I am I still praying for our past president there. I'm just praying he will wake up and he'll be like, ay, 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 I should have had a V8, and he'll get it, you know? You just gotta love the person, love the people, have patience, and just keep talking to them.
You know, I want to react to that because I think it's a powerful question. I like the way you put it. I've also from the framework that sometimes you can't waste your time. I mean, there's only so much time left on earth for all of us. And there's some people who don't want to get it, or they have not had that what we call epiphany. We use that in the Catholic Church a little bit. They don't see it. And you can talk to the wall if you want to, but I come to the sad realization that some people don't want to move. And again, I'm not going to stand there in their way if they don't want to move, particularly if they see the water coming or whatever it is. So I try to work on those who are ready for it, who are open, who are at least halfway able to understand the cognitive process of what we're dealing with. But I also know that there are people who will say, those are the other folks we need to convert or work with. But there are some people who don't want that. And again, it's your call, or my call, whoever call, but it's much more easier to go with folks who at least have a halfway open mind, or even at a point where they can dialogue with you. Because I've met people who I can disagree immensely. And even my neighbor, I speak of him, who's a really comes from a different worldview. But at the end of the day, he's going to always be there to support you and do things with you, even though we don't see each other eye to eye on many of our political or social issues. So I understand that. But again, it depends what kind of time you have. And again, we can have different points of view on this. But I think what we have to do is give people the public space to have a safe conversation to see where they're at. Because again, if you believe in redemption, you believe in conversion, if you believe in a lot of things, you cannot give up. And I guess I use that quote that Ernie Chambers uses, that when Father Time catches me, I hope Father Time catches me where I'm in motion, trying to make the world better than when I found it. So folks, I really think it's very important for us to continue this. And I've learned a great deal, and I appreciate people participating today. And join us again. We're going to have another event next week on the 17th where Cynthia is going to repeat kind of like what she did today, a little bit more nuance, I guess, after you do it again, and maybe different participants. And then on the 24th of February, we're going to have Cheryl Weston, who's a lifetime volunteer advocate about social justice and challenging political structures, on how we can get much more involved in doing that. And one of the comments related to her is, why do you do things out of love? Why do you volunteer your time? Why do you do things you're not getting paid for? And I think it goes down to those of us who are involved in this kind of work. You believe in other people. You want to make it better for those who are not yet born. So on that note, I would like to say thanks to all of you who participated tonight. Encourage your friends, family, associates, and some people say frenemies to participate in these kind of events, because I think Nebraska can be a place on the hill as well as Omaha and elsewhere by us doing what we did tonight. So I really appreciate it and was very much moved by many of the comments. And obviously great credit to Reverend Dr. Cynthia Lindenmeyer, who provided a great deal of light. And one of the same things we like to always end on is saying, may the force be with you, and Barocco.